coming to similar base rate plus the margin. What is that we are trying to do in Kafral? So while on this demand side, a lot of figures are available, including Reserve Bank's own estimate of growth of credit, which is based on the monetary policy. On the supply side, as I mentioned, there is not much information available. So what in Kafral we are trying to arrive at some sort of a figure, some index. So in the next few months, we are confident that we will come out with some sort of a index from the demand side of the credit. Of course, these are the types of questions in which the quantitative answers using modern methods are being used. We have brought a lot of research people from various other jurisdictions, and we are trying to build some sort of a model to predict the credit demand from the demand side. I'm sure Kafral will be able to come out with some figure which is absent today. So this is in brief my presentation, a copy of which will be made available to you. All the information available here is based on published figures of the Reserve Bank of India, and it is available even on the website of the Reserve Bank of India. So thank you. With this, I will now request my colleague from ILFS, who would like to.
Sure. So I don't have a presentation, but I'll speak based on the notes I've got. I belong to the infrastructure finance industry, so I'll confine my discussion to the credit gaps in the infrastructure sector. Maybe I'll tell you first about what is the market, size of the market, what are the characteristics of the market, and where is the credit gap, and what can be done about it. If you see the Indian infrastructure finance market, essentially today it must be about say 12 trillion INR rupees, mainly funded by banks to the extent of 2/3 of this, and 1/3 funded by the non-banking finance companies. There are about 12 to 13 non-banking finance companies dedicated to infrastructure sector, and they are the one who have funded 1/3. Unfortunately, there's a big insurance and pension sector in India, but they have more or less kept themselves away from the infrastructure finance market. And this is in a way ironical because they are the one who have got a long-term source of fund. If you see banks or if you see NBFCs, essentially they have liabilities which is of the tenure of maximum 2 to 3 years. And actually the exposure, entire exposure is directly or indirectly of the banks, because while NBFCs have fund infrastructure, but they have got funded by the banks. So indirectly all the exposure has been taken by the banking sector in India. And when I say banks, it is about 75% of this is the public sector banks, and about 20% is the private sector banks, and very small portion is foreign banks. They have more or less kept themselves away of the infrastructure sector. So this is broadly how the sector has been funded till now. And coming to the characteristics of funding, mostly these loans are actually, in a way, it's a bipolar market. On one hand, you have got deals for which there is a very high competition, but these deals are just about 10 or 15% of the market. So for these kind of deals, the pricing is very fine. For example, if you take say a AAA corporate in India, current yields for 5 years is about say 9.5%. But if the same corporate, if it tries to borrow from the offshore market, basically it will have international rating of say BBB minus, which is the rating of India, and it will have a dollar yield of around 2.6%. But to that, if you add the hedging cost, which is around 8.5%, the actual borrowing cost will come to around 11.5%. So what I'm trying to say is that the spreads in the domestic markets are actually far lower than what probably these corporates can borrow in the international market. And same thing is also true for the AA assets. So clearly in a bipolar market, you have got, on one hand, you've got deals where everyone is running after, where the pricing is very fine. On the other hand, you have got a whole bunch of 80% of the credits which are in need of funding, but no one wants to fund them for various reasons. I'll discuss these reasons as I go ahead. Now coming to the covenants, because covenants are an important part of any lending. The covenants are relatively relaxed, but at the same time, the market is evolving. You'll be surprised to know that most of the loans given don't have a very generous call options, that is the prepayment options. So what it essentially means is that if a particular company, when it was given a loan, probably the credit was say triple B, if that company starts doing well, then the company has the right to prepay and take a loan at a lower rate. But if something goes wrong, then the entire risk is that of the bank. So clearly this is not something which is a level playing field, and I expect market to evolve and correct this. Apart from this, the collateral, the security creation in India is a very time consuming and a costly process. So the way market has evolved is that it's almost impossible to create mortgage before you disburse the loan. Because one is the mortgage creation is expensive. Secondly, it involves going through the title deeds and going through the registrars, and the laws are very complex. So the banks actually fund the particular transaction much before the security is created. And I've seen that at times it takes years to create the security, and for that time the loan actually remains more or less unsecured. So this again is a very skewed aspect of the market. Apart from that, most of the lending is floating rate, which is fine because of the fact that the banks have a maximum liability of 2 to 3 years, through which they fund long-term loans, which are of sometimes 10 to 15 years in the infrastructure sector. Apart from that, a peculiarity of the market is that the disbursements happen much earlier than some of the important milestones in the project. For example, if there's a project, any sane lender will try to measure the risk in the form of, various aspects. Now, one of the risks is the regulatory risk. Now, this is actually impossible to measure and to price. But in the Indian market, more often than not, we find that environmental approvals, forest approvals, and various other approvals take years to come. And of course, project can't wait for that longer time. So the disbursement starts much before these approvals come. And that is one of the key reasons that we have, a large number of NPAs and restructured assets in the infrastructure sector today. The other peculiarity is that the group exposure norms and the individual company exposure norms in India are very relaxed. For example, to one particular group in infrastructure sector, you can lend up to 50% of the net worth of the bank. Right. And with the approval of the board, actually you can go up to 55%. And this is not the global practice. Global practice is maximum 25%. Because of this, what has happened is that quite a few of the banks have very concentrated exposures in one groups. So more than the group, it has become the liability of the bank, and bank has to ensure that these groups are eventually bailed out. And that leads to a vicious circle where the banks keep on taking the exposure to keep these assets standard. So clearly, this is not the best of way to lend, but at the same time, I must add that the market is evolving. The lenders have had a bad experience, and now the covenants are getting tightened. So this is very briefly about the characteristics of the market. Now I'll talk about the credit gap. Our own estimate is that in the next 3 years, because the 12th plan is for the 5 years, 2 years already gone. So next 3 years, we are expecting this gap to be about 2.5 to 3 trillion INR. That is about 2.5 lakh crores. Now this estimate is based on various assumptions. So based on the assumptions, the things can go from left to right, and the pendulum can really swing. But howsoever you actually try to measure it, you will find that the credit gap is there. Just to go through the assumptions, basically, if you see the 12th 5-year plan, it talked about the infrastructure investment of $1 trillion US dollars. In INR terms, it is about 60 to 65 trillion INR. But this was based on a growth rate of 9%, number one. Number two, this was based on the inflation rate of 5%. The reality is that in the last, because the plan started from 2012, in the last 2 years, we have seen a growth of sub 5% in India. And secondly, but we have seen a much higher inflation rate. Okay. Even in the next 3 years, probably we'll see an average growth rate of 6%, 6 to 6.5. So if you change the assumption accordingly, and if you factor in the basic fact that inflation is going to be far higher, if these two things are taken into account, then our estimate is that in the 12th 5-year plan, the actual infrastructure investment should be close to about 55 trillion INR. So it will be 10 trillion less. But in the last 2 years, it has been not more than 15 trillion. So we have a gap. So we have a total requirement in the next 3 years of about 40 trillion INR. Now 50% of this is expected to be by the government, through various measures. 50% will come from the private sector. So about say 20 trillion INR. And a very realistic assumption is a debt equity of 2:1. So basically in the next 3 years, we are talking about investment of about 12.5 to 13 trillion INR from the various players in the Indian finance market. That can be banks, NBFCs, insurance companies, pension funds, so on and so on. Our estimate is that today, because banks have a very high exposure in infrastructure, it is around 14%. It cannot be like this for too long, so probably it will settle around 12%. And based on this assumption, there will be a credit gap, as I told you, of around 2.5 to 3 trillion INR. That's a lot of money, because this is in the next 3 years. Now, how can we really bridge this? As I told you earlier, the source of funding, which is really long term, is from the pension fund and from the insurance sector. So one way of bridging this gap is to get the offshore insurance and pension fund into the infrastructure sector in India. But that's easier said than done. One is because the experience has been pretty bad in the infrastructure sector. Even if there are a lot of improvement, the basic problem is that today if you see the pricing in the sector, for a triple B credit, which is typically the pricing when the projects are under implementation or just commission, for that rating the pricing is around 13 to 13.5% per annum. But if an offshore investor comes, he will also try to hedge this risk. Hedging cost for even 5 years is 8.5%. And beyond 5 years, hedging is actually not available. Even if it is available, it is very expensive. So if you take hedging into account, then the dollar return will not be more than 5%, which actually is a very low return. For a double B international assets, the offshore investors make about 8% in dollar terms. So there's no reason why for them to come here. So clearly this segment, while in the long run it can come, in the next 3 years, I doubt whether they'll come in a big way, unless they are willing to take the currency risk. Now that leaves the domestic pension and insurance sector. Now domestic pension and insurance sector is actually quite big. Today the banking sector would be close to about say 80 trillion INR. The insurance and pension sector together would be about 25 trillion INR and growing very fast. Now the question is why they have not actually come into the infrastructure sector. The reason is not very difficult to understand. First is the macroeconomic reality. The macroeconomic reality is that today in India we have high fiscal deficit. At the center level it is around 4.5%. At the state level you should add another 2.5 or 3%. So with that high level of fiscal deficit, the entire crowding out is taking place from the private sector to the government sector. Now at some stage this crowding out has to come down, because today for pension funds and insurance companies it is very easy to just invest in Government of India bond because they get a decent yield. So one is that these deficits have to be corrected. The second reason is that today the risk of investing in infrastructure, the sector as it stands today, is just too high. The insurance companies don't have the expertise to evaluate that kind of risk. So unless something is done about it, it will be very difficult for these companies to come into the infrastructure sector. Now this risk can be addressed only by changing the regulations. Today we need to have a regulatory regime in India where once a company is implementing a project, it knows in finite terms that it has to do X, Y, and Z to get an environmental approval, A, B, and C to get a forest approval, and whatever, alpha, beta, and gamma to get the land acquisition done. Unless these basic things are corrected, it will be very difficult for insurance and pension sector to come into infrastructure sector. Today, we have a EPFO, which is about 6.5 trillion INR and growing because everyone has to invest there. We have LIC, which is almost 12 trillion INR. Then we have got private sector insurance companies, life insurance companies, which will be about 3 to 4 trillion INR. Then we have got general insurance companies. So this sector is getting bigger, and it is in the interest of the country that money from here goes into the infrastructure sector. Now, because of the macro issues, the government has taken some positive steps. It came out with infrastructure debt funds, and I belong to that particular industry. So the whole concept is that we should be able to mobilize funds from this particular segment, pension and insurance sector, and get it into the infrastructure sector. Now, while it's a very positive development and activities are happening here, but still certain tweaking of regulations are required for the scale up. If we are really talking about 2.5 trillion INR. So I'll come to the, the things which are required to be done to bridge this particular credit gap. As I told you, the most important thing to be done is to make the regulatory regime more predictable. So this hopefully with experience will happen, and this is something
So
which
what
is,
we'll do,
yeah.
we'll complete and question answer, we can take some.
yeah, okay, so fine. So I'll just take 2 more minutes to finish this.
Oh.
Yeah. So, the must-have things are, one is that we have to make the regulatory regime much more predictable. Secondly, and again it is quite important that we have to do something about the creation of mortgage in India. They have to be far faster, and they have to also invocation has to be far faster. This is a must-have. Even within the IDF regime, while the institutions have been allowed to invest, but at the same time, they have certain other issues because of which they find it difficult to invest. So those things have to be corrected. And then there are certain good to have things, like the investment norms for insurance and pension companies have to be far more relaxed. Currently, they can invest more or less only in the AAA credits. Probably they can come down to AA, and so on and so forth. Lastly, there is a lot of arbitrage in the market, which needs to be corrected. So this is in brief about the infrastructure sector, and so now I think we can go to other sectors.
Yeah, I will now request Mr. Anjan Ghosh from ICRA to make an initial comment.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I think we are running beyond time, so I'll keep my remarks very brief. Manish has spoken in detail about the type of infrastructure credit gaps which are likely to come up in the infrastructure sector. Now, on the one hand, we talk about the infrastructure gap, the credit gap, or the lack of availability of finances. On the other hand, I would like to talk about our experience in this sector, not in terms of credit rating or the downgrade, but in terms of certain new products which are in the market and why they are not really taking off. For one of the things which was launched with much fanfare a couple of years back was the partial credit enhancement scheme by IIFCL. Now